All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is John and Matthew, the Samurai Brothers. We're back, Matthew, for episode 33 of our restarted podcast. And this weekend had a lot of national championships going on for wrestling. And obviously, we have the D1 championships that are going to be coming up next weekend, I believe. Is that correct, Matthew?
Yep.
And we also have some
on ESPN Plus.
On ESPN Plus, and also we've got the Sumo Basho going on right now. So I think, Matthew, we should get right into it, don't you think? So let's go ahead and get into the Harubasho. So as of day 8, there is no undefeated wrestlers in the top division. One thing we do know is that there are 3 wrestlers in the top division with 1 loss. Ono Sato, who is the Ozeki, and then we have Takayasu and Churo Naomi, who's down at the bottom. Now, the only one of those who has experience with a Yusho would be Ono Sato. He's won it on 2 occasions, so he's doing what he's supposed to be doing as an Ozeki, which is helping to lead the pack, right?
Yeah, well, it's like you said, he's not this is not new to him. He's got as many Yusho as our current Yokozuna. So this is not unusual for him. It's probably, at some point he's probably himself going to make Yokozuna. Whether this is going to be the beginning of that streak or not, we currently don't know, because of course, it's still technically anybody's game.
Yes, right now it's midway through the Basho. Perennial Yusho chaser Takayasu is also in the race. And, to a lot of, especially sumo fans and on the sumo forum, there's kind of this thing about that Takayasu is like always there, but he just cannot pull it off because he succumbs to pressure to win the Yusho right at the end. For example, the closest he was at was in a 3-way playoff not too long ago that he ended up losing. But one of the things that's really put him in the chase right now is the fact that he was able to pull off a Kimboshi win against Hoshoryu. But given their head-to-head history, I mean, Takayasu was going into the one match, I think it was a 9-2 advantage. So the fact that he ended up upsetting the Yokozuna for a Kimboshi win is not necessarily a surprise, don't you think?
Yeah, it is kind of unusual in that he has more wins against the current Yokozuna than by a significant margin, 7-2. So
9-2 it was.
9-2. So he's definitely favored there, but it's one of those things where it is kind of unusual in that regard. But let's be honest, in his he's like 37, right?
Takayasu right now, I think, he's kind of up there in he's 35.
He's kind of up there. So, and I think he did peak probably around his, when you said when he was an Ozeki and he got that one playoff. So I don't, I mean, maybe he could pull an upset, but as I recall, he's I did some skipping ahead, and I think he's up against Koto Zakura. So it's not gonna be an easy match for him,
right? Because their head-to-head is currently even.
Yeah, so basically he's got less of a chance against Koto Zakura, who's also kind of got his back against
groove back
as a Karoban Ozeki. So he's more motivated to try to win this than ever, especially considering that he didn't exactly do good in the first week. And the first week was supposed to be when he was able to get ahead. So he's going to be more motivated, even if he doesn't win the Basho, to try to at least get 8 so that he
Well,
doesn't drop out.
and also looking at Kotozakura's match against Wakamoto Haru from yesterday, definitely he was going. I'm sorry, no, it was Kirishima. He lost to Wakamoto Haru on the first day, but against Kirishima because Kotozakura had a 14-4 or 4-14 record, against Kirishima. So the odds were in the favor of Kirishima winning that match. But to me, Kotozakura really went out to make sure that he was going to be able to win that match and put himself in a more comfortable position at 5-3 versus 4-4. Because at 4-4, that would definitely not be good for him to go into the second week. Don't you agree?
Yeah, the reality is it's like the second week. If you're upper, then you're definitely going through the gauntlet because you've got your peers who are on your level, if not better, who are they're vying for stuff. So, and in the case of Onosato, he's vying for Yusho. In the case of Hoshoryu is still kind of vying for a Yusho. Like I said, he's not mathematically out yet, but there are still other people because there's also three only 2 lost people, which includes Takeru Fuji, who's also an up and comer. So
I think though one thing we can say though is as long as Hoshoryu can get 10 wins, 11 wins would be more preferable. But obviously there's only a couple people who have won their Yusho or their debut Basho as a Yokozuna. So I think Hoshoryu, even if he doesn't win, if he can manage, 10, 11 wins, that'll be okay. Not great, but, at least a bit more respectable in that sense. So, yeah, with that being said, so we'll see how it goes. Obviously, our next week episode will review how the Basho went. So that'll be something to see. Either we'll have, will someone actually come out and have their first Yusho? Can Hoshoryu pull it off? Will Onosato start a Tsuna run? We'll see, right, Matthew?
Yep, we're just gonna have to see because a lot can happen in 7 days.
All right, great. So let's move on then to our next series of discussions. We'll have NCWA. So Matthew, I'm sure you're more in tune to this than I was because I had not. I was paying more attention to D1, D2, D3, but obviously with NCWA, Menlo winning the men's title at the NCWA championships. Obviously, with them being in a transition from NAIA to D2, I guess that's not surprising. If you want to go into more details about that.
Well, the reality is, the NCWA has basically been the home since its inception. Has basically been the home of the transitioning program that doesn't really have anywhere else to go, right. And that has very much been reflected in because there was that time like when I was like right after I finished wrestling when you had all these NAIA to D2 programs like like Lindenwood, McKendree. Then you even had some D2 to D1s like Southern Illinois, Edwardsville. Oh yeah, Cal Baptist, and it's so you had all these programs that basically the NCWA basically became that home, and in that way, it kind of in a way elevated the NCWA in that regard. It went, the NCWA went in from being founded in the late 90s to basically being homes to, these programs that had been Title IX to basically being the transitional home of these programs that can't do the postseason during their transition, but are but can still compete in an after in a postseason.
That and some other D1 schools who they're not necessarily having these programs as full competition D1 programs. Like for example, I'm looking at the final rankings. You've got teams like Washington State, you've got UCF, let me see here, UConn, UNLV. I mean, these are teams that are full on D1 programs, D1 schools as a whole, but they just don't have a fully recognized D1 wrestling programs. So
Yeah,
I think that's,
and these teams have kind of established themselves as club teams, and the hope is that maybe with women's wrestling starting, maybe they can, start a men's program by backing off of a women's program. That's definitely one of the advantages and hopes that those of us in the wrestling community were hoping, is that you could use women's programs as a bulwark against Title IX. So the only way that you would lose the men's program is if the women's program goes too.
yeah.
So
and go ahead.
And I don't think a lot of I don't think if you took the time to start a women's program, you'd really be anxious to lose it. That quick.
Something I did notice. Let me see. There's teams like out from the East Coast, or I'm sorry, the West Coast. Closer like Arizona. I do see San Jose State. Because they used to have a program, and then UCLA is also in there. I don't see USC. But I recall how, and then Washington also was in there too. I recall just recently I saw someone posting on, it was either Facebook or Instagram, loathing the fact that this was the first Big Ten championship in which all teams that were in the Big Ten as a whole did not participate in the Big Ten. And obviously we would be referring to UCLA, USC, Oregon, and Washington not having full-on wrestling programs. So this was the first year that the Big Ten did not have a 100% participation at their wrestling championship tournament. But
yeah, and that is kind of irritating. And before those four Pac-12 schools joined, there was that myth that that because of the full participation, that that the Big Ten had a rule that you had to have wrestling in it.
Yeah,
but
there's nothing.
Yeah, them joining proved that was not a.
Well, yeah, and to be honest, yeah, both you and I had assumed that there was something in the Big Ten's constitution for that, but there is actually nothing that requires that all schools have wrestling.
Yeah.
It's just that it just so happened to be that way.
Yeah, I searched when there was that thing brought up. I actually searched the Constitution. It was very hard to find. I don't know why these conferences make their Constitution so hard to find, but yeah, I looked it up and it wasn't in there, and it's just like, okay. But I think USC has flirted on and off with having wrestling programs as well. It's just like, well, why? It's like, again, the emerging sports now of full-on sport, so why not
women's? Yeah, so we'll see what's going to happen with that, but obviously Menlo making waves, and we'll see what happens.
Since we mentioned the NAIA, just one more piggyback off of that. I was talking with our dad earlier, and basically around the time that I was wrestling between 2007 to 2011, it seems that was the peak of competition, the competitive level in NAIA, because you had all these programs, like I said, that shortly after went D2. So, and in some cases D1 with Cal Baptist, and I think Lindenwood is supposed to be transitioning to D1 as well.
Well,
right?
Yeah, because you had there were Cal Baptist, Grand Canyon,
McKendree,
but and it's funny though. It's like I could swear Cal Baptist was in transition limbo for forever, because
4 years. That's the transition.
Well, because they went from NAIA to D2, and then they went from D2 to D1. I mean, it almost seemed like they were just there forever. Because
6 total years that they were in transition. Yeah. So,
Jimmy Martinez, state champion for Santa Ana College, when he wrestled at Cal Baptist, he was there during their transition period. And so he ended up being an NCWA finalist and then an NCWA national champion. So But it was during the transition time. But shout out to him for that.
Yeah.
On the flip side, women's, we had Tarleton State win the women's national championship, and it was only by half a point, too.
Oh yeah, the top three were separated by a point, 1 point. So, it is interesting because I looked up Tarleton State men placed third in the tournament. It looks like they are actually building up to actually become a full-fledged program, and they're either D2 or D1 or something like that. So we might be having another program. I don't know where they'd be because they're in Texas.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd heard about them.
I don't know where they'd go because the Big Ten's kind of compacted as it is. Maybe SoCon, the MAC, something like that. But it would be nice to have another program starting up. And yeah, they've they're getting their start in
They could always go to the Pac-12s, but I think I definitely want to bring up the future of the Pac-12s in a future episode.
Now we could do that next week.
Yeah, that's a whole thing in and of itself. So yeah, we see what happened here, but the real big talk of this week, Matthew, is D3. Actually, let's just get into D2 really quick because I really want to explore about how D3 went. D2, Nebraska Kearney, wins I believe this is their 5th national championship at the D2 level. And here's the funny thing. They demolished the competition. They had 115 team points. Second place, Augustana had 63. So they won it by 52 points. And what makes it even more funny is that of the 10 weight classes, Nebraska Kearney ended up having 8 All-Americans, no champions. No champions. And I think we saw that recently. It was either I don't know if it was Wartburg or Augsburg in the D3 championship a few years back. Obviously, the most famous team that went on to win a national championship without any champions was Minnesota back in the day. We had that, but Nebraska Kearney did have, I think, 2 finalists, and they ended up not winning. But just the matter of the fact that they, had 8 All-Americans, no champions with 115 points. That to me indicates that everyone else just did not perform, right?
Yeah, because it's just because in order to get to the championships, that is points. So the fact that it means that the other teams just didn't, they had champions, but clearly they weren't up there. Whereas Nebraska, as a team overall, showed up. Mm-hmm. And they're, like you said, 8 All-Americans. They all went up there and they performed. They contributed. That's the thing about a team tournament like that is it's not about who's on top of the podium. It's about who puts the number of people on the podium.
Right. Yep. So that's an interesting one. Congratulations to Coach Dalton Jensen. This is his 2nd national title.
Yeah, and Nebraska, like you said, Nebraska Kearney. It's been a while since Nebraska Kearney took a championship, but they've got a storied history.
Yeah, 3 years ago was when they won it. When they won their 4th title.
Yeah, when like I'll just throw an example out there again. When I was wrestling, we went to the Nebraska Kearney Open a few times, and yeah, it was tough. It was definitely tough, and that's where you went out there to. But yeah, they've always been good at that level, and so.
Yeah, because I think they broke the streak that was being run by Central Oklahoma, and actually, to be honest, the Central Oklahoma is no joke either. In fact, I think they have the most titles out of any D2 school right now with 9. I know we had Cal Poly and Cal Bakersfield were very dominant in the 70s and the 80s, but once they went to D1, then it's been Central Oklahoma has had their runs here and there. Obviously, some other schools have had their runs. With the unfortunate cutting of Nebraska Omaha, who went to D1 and cut the program because of that, no more for them. And so recently it's kind of been Kearney, Central Oklahoma, and then St. Cloud State, had an interesting run there too. So
An interesting thing, St. Cloud State, wait, are they still around? Because as I recall, they cut their program at one point.
Did they? Well, because they won it back in 2021. I know that.
They must have I think they restarted their program. Because, back in the day, I was gonna go to Pensacola Christian College to the Hayes Winkles. That's their alma mater.
Mm-hmm.
And St. Cloud State had cut their program a while back. So that means that they restarted their program. So
yeah. Okay. All right. D3, Matthew. So here is some very interesting something interesting that happened. And I had actually I obviously, because we kind of see these things right at the end of the season when it's all going on, but obviously the perennial championship contenders for the D3 title is Augsburg and Wartburg. And pretty much since 1994, it's only been those two schools that have won the title. We've had a couple of schools come close. In fact, back in 2022, Wartburg beat Wabash by 1 point to claim the title. So that was pretty something. But when I was reading comments based on the results that were coming up, Johnson and Wales, which is a private university in Rhode Island, of all places, and so that's going to be an interesting stat for me to research coming up. I don't think we've ever seen a school from Rhode Island win a national championship in wrestling. I think this may be the first, but Wartburg also did win it, because what happened was Wartburg and Johnson and Wales tied at 83.5 points each to have a dual claim at the national title. Now, so what does that mean exactly? This is the first time since 1993 that a school other than Wartburg or Augsburg has claimed the title. And then the other interesting stat, Matthew, and I'm going to get your opinion about this. This is the first time since 1933 that we have had two teams tie for an NCAA title. So give me your thoughts on that.
Well, it's one of those things where in the sport of wrestling, ties normally don't happen in a team tournament like that. So the fact that it that just goes to show it had been so long since the last time that you had a tie like that. And in most sports, you don't have a tie like that. Most sports, you have a winner in some capacity. Like I think like in D1 football, for example, in the Bull division, I think it's been like almost 100 years since there was a tie. I might be wrong. There might have been something that happened recently, but you don't normally have ties like that because of the competitiveness. So for this to happen for the first time in
92 years, and just to give you a bit of history on who those two teams were in 1933, it was basically Iowa State and Oklahoma State.
Yeah, which that contributes to both of their respective, title, histories. which again, Oklahoma State's, 33 national titles, which is a record that no one's close to beating. Mm-hmm. Cale could win every title for however long. He'd have to. Cale's what, in his 40s or 50s?
Probably in his late 40s, I would imagine.
He'd have to win every title. He'd have to coach into like his 70s and win every single title in order to bring that total to. It's like we've said before, and this is something that we might talk later. He could definitely beat Gable's record. Yeah, he's not going to beat Oklahoma State's record. That has taken place over the course of
Well, and that in itself is kind of a combination of, one, the program's storied history, but two, it's been able to be done with multiple coaches. Now,
Yeah, I think
it's kind of like that thing with.
I think every single coach at Okie State won at least one national title.
Right.
So,
Yeah, even Jose, because I think he ended up being fired. If memory serves me correctly, I'd have to go back and research. But even he was able to win a national title for Oklahoma State. But and I think there have been even in the bowl. I think not the BCS, but the what do you call it? The college football era. I think there has been there was one team a few years back that was from the Group of Five conference. I think it might have been UCF. I'm not entirely sure, but they were not invited to the college football playoff. But they did.
yeah, I remember that. It was UCF. They went undefeated. So
right, they went undefeated. So at least in their history books, they lay a claim to a share of the national title in football. So I mean, yeah, these things do happen. Even in the 3C2A, there have been a couple of times where some programs have. I think it's either happened on 2 or 3 occasions where teams did tie for the state title. So, but just the fact that in at least at the national level, that this is only the second time I think in the history of the NCAA division that we've had a dual claim on the championship. Has not happened in D2, and I'm not so sure about NAIA. I would have to look it up to be sure. But
well, one thing also to remember is that was back when the N33. That was back when the NCAA just had one division.
Right, they had the one division.
Yeah, the splits into D2 and D3 happened later on.
Yeah. Well, okay, so that is an interesting way of how that has gone down. So, Matthew, I think we're going to talk about the D1 division now.
We forgot to briefly talk about the NAIA women.
Did we? Okay.
Yep.
Yes.
So just briefly talk about that.
Of course. Let me see here. Let's just make sure. Oh, yes. So Life University, and they, this was not even close. So kind of a reverse, like you had earlier mentioned, because the men's program for NAIA Grandview just totally demolished the field.
Well, and it was a reverse in that it was Grandview men. It was Grandview first, Life second.
Life second.
This one, it's Life first, Grandview second.
Yes, and I think, like you had mentioned, I think of all of the weight classes, let me see here. I do have.
Oh yeah, there were some very interesting stats from.
Yeah,
you had 3 Nigerian women who are on the Nigerian team. You had a woman from I think Serbia. You had 3 sisters.
Right, and then they also, I think Life also had, you said 6 finalists, right? And of those 3 did win. So yes, that's a pretty significant way to finish that off for the season.
Yeah, and of the 2, because it's of the, let's just say of the 2 major national women's tournaments, it's the NAIA tournament's been going longer than the NCAA tournament, than the NCAA tournament, because the NCAA tournament starts next year. NAIA was ahead of the ball in that regard.
Also, one thing that I've noticed, your alma mater did have 2 women place All-American.
Well, MOBAP's always because Brian Jackson was definitely a trailblazer in women's wrestling, so he was always ahead of the ball, and that tradition's kind of continued in his successors with the program. So that's not surprising. Not to mention, MOBAP can claim an Olympic champion and a national champion. So
yeah, that's true.
in Helen Morales.
So on the flip side, though, at least from California, because there are a couple of NAIA programs in California, it doesn't look like Vanguard has a women's program. Maybe they'll have one sometime. Other than that, Westcliff in
I think
Irvine
Hope has one.
I'm looking it up. Although maybe what it might have been is Vanguard didn't qualify. That's another.
I checked. Vanguard doesn't have a women's program yet. They would be smart to create one again as a bulwark.
What about Hope? Do they have a program?
I think they might have had a women's tournament. I thought I saw Hope in that tournament. I
know Westcliff from Irvine. They did send 2 women to the tournament.
To me, it's so crazy how there's so many. Well, because there was also that one other program, college in San Dimas, who unfortunately cut both their men's and women's programs. But to me, it's so crazy how there's so many SoCal. It's like if this had been the situation, I would have stayed home. I would have gone to Vanguard. I would have gone to Briarcliff. I would have gone to
Vanguard. Didn't
one of those programs.
Vanguard didn't start back up until a few years ago, so you wouldn't have had that opportunity.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying that you know, if I'd been born like 10 years later, I would have had opportunities that I didn't have.
Okay. All right. Well, yep. So that was quite the reversal that we had. So, you know, I mean, we're still going to have these rivalries between Life and Grandview without a doubt for years to come.
Yep.
Anyway, well, let's do a quick preview then, Matthew, as our time will be winding down. Just, you know, how the D1 championships are going to be looking at. I did a quick search for, you know, some of the top players that we're expecting, you know, for the tournament. And I think if anyone thinks that another team besides PSU is going to win, I don't know. I got a piece of land to sell you out in the Pacific Ocean.
An island?
Yeah, a piece of land out in the Pacific Ocean somewhere. I don't know, man, because just this.
You could. I mean, there's plenty of islands.
I mean, well, when we look at it, so you know, Penn State leading, Iowa, you know, Oklahoma State, you know, it is what it is. And the thing, Penn State qualified all 10 of their wrestlers. I'm gonna look here really quick to see how. But the thing is, Penn State, you know, 9 of their 10 wrestlers are seeded 4 and above. You know, basically we have 4 number 1 seeds, 2 each of a 2 and a 3 seed, and then a 4 seed, and then the other wrestler is an 8 seed. So, you know, I don't know.
He's expected to at least get on the podium.
I mean, you know, Iowa has qualified 9. Let's see here for Okie State, they've qualified 9. You know, which is great. You know, it's obviously we've seen that David Taylor has really worked some of his magic, and this is just how they intended it to be, right? You know, John Smith, you know, graciously retiring, letting, you know, this new generation take it. And we're seeing, you know, I'm really hoping that, you know, we'll see some big success for this storied program, don't you think?
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like it takes time to build a program the way that you want to build the program. Not that John Smith was never a bad coach. He was the coach for as long as he was for a reason. He was a good wrestler, and he was able to translate that out into, you know, 5 national titles. But he just always had to go against these behemoths that were around him at the time. For a time, that was Gable, then Brands, then you know, who I forgot who the coach was at Minnesota. The old school coach,
Jay Robinson.
Yeah, Jay Robinson, and then Kale came in. So it's one of those things where it was just he did a good job with what he had, but eventually, good things must come to an end. So the John Smith era came to an end, and David Taylor has a way of doing things, but he has to build up to that. So I would say that it's been a successful season for him up until this point. The Big 12 is a pretty good opportunity in order to qualify for the future, but for right now, he's got what he's got.
Considering that David Taylor is only the second coach in Big 12 history to win the tournament in his first season as head coach, with the first coach being Kale. So, I think he is setting a good example. And, I think, Wyatt Hendrickson really had to come from behind, come in to really help elevate Oklahoma State to that title. So we'll see what's going to happen, but it should be interesting this weekend.
I didn't check. How many did the Ivy League, the new standalone Ivy League, qualify?
Well, let me see here. They had, let me see here really quick, because we are running a little bit short on time.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, they did take some qualifiers away from the AAWA, which we will discuss in the next week. So Matthew, with that being said, we'll see how this goes, and next week we're gonna really follow up on this. Everyone, thanks for tuning in today to hear us discuss about how things are gonna go. Make sure to follow us on our socials and like the video and subscribe to the Samurai Brothers podcast. So with that being said, Matthew, anything else before we go?
Well, we're just looking forward to it, and realistically, looking forward to having some more time, because these last few weeks have kind of been rather condensed with having to, being the wrestling postseason and having to kind of scrunch things in with. But we'll be looking forward to being able to get more time to actually talk about stuff. Not to mention One Piece comes back that next week, so we'll be able to talk about that and nationals and stuff like that. So,
all right. Well, to everyone, we want to thank you again for tuning in, and we will be seeing you in the next time.